Maine officials have barred former President Donald Trump from the primary ballot, citing the insurrectionist clause in the 14th Amendment. The Trump campaign says they will aggressively fight the ruling, the second time this month a state has ruled against him from appearing on a ballot, the other being Colorado. Joining us now to break down the latest political headlines is my friend and colleague, Julia Manchester. Julia, thanks for being here. It's been the same reaction as Colorado with regards to Maine. Democrats and Republicans say that the voters, not a judge, should decide who's on the ballot. What's America thinking?
Yeah, on that point, look, America is, I would say, overall not exactly happy about this. I think there are Democrats who would support this and are going to support it going forward when other states expectedly do this. But I thought it was really interesting that the Democratic congressman from Maine, Jared Golden, said yesterday that he disagreed with the state's Democratic Secretary of State on this ruling. And, to add to that dynamic, the National Republican Campaign Committee, for those watching at home, that's the House Republican campaign arm, they started attacking Golden after the ruling was released, tying him to the Secretary of State, posting pictures of him and the Secretary of State. But now we're seeing Golden trying to distance himself from this. So I think what that shows is that this could be a politically perilous situation for Democrats going forward if other states go in this direction as Colorado and Maine have.
Well, Nikki Haley, she's even saying that she would pardon Trump if she was elected president. Do the other folks in the race agree with her?
Yeah, look, I think the other folks in the race certainly agree with her on that point. They are afraid of the Trump base on this issue. They're trying to get a slice of that base in many cases, like with Ron DeSantis. They share that base with Donald Trump. So on this issue, they want to appear maybe pro-Trump without appearing pro-Trump, if that makes sense in this regard. So going forward, it puts them in a difficult position. But at the end of the day, Kevin, you and I are talking about this with Donald Trump. We're not talking about the other candidates and their visions and platforms for the future. We're talking about Donald Trump once again, facing some sort of legal or political, roadblock, if you will, that will eventually or could eventually end up benefiting him.
Well, you're right. I mean, we're not talking about the future, but a lot of us are talking about the Civil War because of Nikki Haley's comments. And she clarified her remarks on the Civil War at a campaign stop. We got the tape. Let's watch.
Of course, the Civil War was about slavery. We know that. That's unquestioned, always the case. We know the Civil War was about slavery.
So, Julia, is this going to be enough damage control for the Haley campaign to keep making the case that she's got momentum, or has Chris Christie sort of stolen the big mo from her?
Yeah, look, it's difficult for Haley going forward, and couldn't have come at a worse time for her campaign. The Hill's decision desk polling average, that is, of polls in New Hampshire shows Haley 17 points behind Donald Trump. That's a pretty narrow lead compared to other leads Donald Trump has held nationally and in other states throughout the primary cycle. Chris Christie is at 10%. So theoretically, if Chris Christie were to drop out of the race, and theoretically, if his supporters were to go to Haley, that could definitely narrow the gap. However, with this flub that Haley had in New Hampshire and Christie now going on the offensive against Haley on her remarks, that makes that dynamic much more difficult for Haley. And we don't know if Christie, by the way, is going to drop out. He's given no indication that he will. However, he's, supposedly shares this never Trump base with Haley. So going forward, it's hard to see how this impacts her. We know that the news cycle moves very fast, but it came at a time when she is very much having this momentum on the rise going forward.
Well, and the Christie campaign, Julia, to your point, capitalized off of this. They're flooding the Granite State ahead of the January 23rd primary with an ad buy saying that he is not getting out of the race, saying that that he is the person to take on Trump. And he criticized Haley on the campaign trail. I'm not sure if you saw that, but he was forcefully pushing back and drawing a contrast against her, trying trying to get her supporters to back him. The crosstabs on the Hill's Decision Desk 2024 have him at 11%. So to your point again, Haley's 17 points behind Trump in the Granite State. Even if she were to miraculously get every single voter of those 11%, that still wouldn't be enough to close that gap. Switching gears, though, down in Georgia, a federal judge has approved upholding the state's newly revised political maps, and the new map all but ensures that Republicans are going to keep their 9-5 congressional advantage in the Peach State. Is this fair?
Look, I think it depends who you're talking to on whether this is fair. I think you're going to see Republicans argue that it's fair. Democrats would argue that, it might disenfranchise voters of color, other voters in the state. This is going to be back and forth that we're going to see going forward in Georgia, because we know that Georgia is one of the narrowest of swing states, and it could be, the first state in the South to reliably go Democrat. We know that there's 2 Democratic senators from Georgia and a Republican president or governor from Georgia. It was a swing state back in the 2020 presidential election, obviously. So this is a battle that Republicans are going to try to win no matter what. And I think we're going to see it politically play out in the courts and at the ballot box.
So that's what's happening in Georgia. Let's go back to Colorado. Lauren Boebert, she's switching districts. So is she going to be attacked as a carpetbagger? I mean, what's going on with Boebert?
She's already being attacked as a carpetbagger online and by a lot of her critics. Look, Lauren Boebert won her reelection bid in 2022 by less than 1,000 votes. It was a very, very narrow margin. It was very much the black sheep of the 2022 midterm elections. We didn't see that one coming, and it ended up being very close. Cook Political Report rated that district as a toss-up. However, now she's running in Ken Buck's, or outgoing Republican Congressman Ken Buck's district. So it's a much safer Republican district. We'll see how she does there. Ken Buck, and her certainly have their differences within the Republican Party, but this is a move to ensure that she doesn't have as close of a race going up against the Democrat in that district.
Well, and those moderates are really going to be such a key determining factor of how that district goes and the direction for the Republicans. And one of the issues that moderate Republicans care about, as you know, is immigration. So when you've got Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying that he's gotten a deal with Mexico on immigration, is that going to be enough to one, stop the border crisis and the 11,000 or so migrants who are in northern Mexico from coming here? But also, what exactly is that agreement going to do in the long term to solve this crisis?
Well, that's exactly it. It depends what this agreement ends up doing. Look, after their meeting earlier this week, we heard that the meeting was good. It went well. It was productive, but we didn't have a lot of details coming out of that meeting. And we know that voters, as they see images of these thousands of migrants coming across the border, they want to know what's in a deal, what are in these conversations and such. So, it's going to depend what happens. And we know that during the Trump administration, there was the Remain in Mexico policy. Trump very much stood up to Obrador or threatened him with the possibility of tariffs. So, the Biden administration has been getting some pushback from moderates and Republicans for not being as strong against Obrador and the Mexicans in this. So I think it depends on what's in the deal. But Democrats are certainly under a lot of pressure, even from other Democrats. You see New York City Mayor Eric Adams, the Chicago mayor, talking about how they can't handle this influx of migrants coming from the border. So Biden's under pressure from all sides here.
So switching gears, it's the end of the year. What was the weirdest story, Julia Manchester, that you covered this year?
Oh my gosh, this is such a curveball. I think, we talked about Lauren Boebert in Colorado 3. I think the what was it? She was in a show, a Beetlejuice, I believe, and she was asked to leave the show for vaping and some inappropriate conduct. We don't really expect that from our members of Congress, and we know that Lauren Boebert's a bit of a firebrand. So it was certainly something to watch there. A very interesting political story for all of us.
Are U.S. officials going to announce that there's life out there in the new year?
Oh my gosh, we've heard so much about UFOs, and I know our partners at News Nation have a lot of reporting on this. I don't know if they'll talk about whether there's life, but I think they're going to talk about, this issue of UFOs, or the story about them is going to continue. I don't know where the UFOs are coming from. I think we're going to hear more maybe about government programs that may be secret, or, other foreign programs, but UFOs aren't going away.
Well, News Nation has been out front on that, and it is a very serious topic. And
Yes.
personally, I think, quite frankly, a lot of folks who are laughing at it, they need to wake up and they need to understand that this is U.S. taxpayer money, and you've got serious lawmakers from on the left and the right who are asking very serious questions. So yes or no, one word answer before I let you go. Julia Manchester, will the general election be between Biden and Trump?
Yes.